Super progressive. What is good? We have another very exciting interview today because, in my opinion, our guest is one of the producers and DJs that have really pushed forward, continued to push forward the UK progressive sound. There's always been that pioneering generation of the Sashas, the John Digweeds, the Nick Warrens. But in terms of the artists in the following generation that are pushing forward the progressive sound, I think our guest today has done an exemplary job at that. He's one of my favorite producers. After meeting a few times, both down in London and up in Manchester at each other's events, I consider him a friend now. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Four Candles to the Super Progressive Podcast. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you for that warm welcome as well, Will. It's great to see you again. Nice to catch up, even though not in person for the first time in a little while. But yeah, it was really good to see you last time, and I'm really looking forward to getting into today's interview, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, I'm so stoked, and I'm gonna ask kind of a layup question to start because it's a topic of conversation amongst my friends and I who are fans of you. But and this wasn't on. We haven't discussed this before, but where does the name come from?
Right, yeah, there's a little bit of a backstory, and I'll run you back to it's about 9 years ago. So I've been producing for about 15 years, right, Will. I started, as everybody would do, hobbyist in my bedroom, trying to lay down a few beats, trying to get things going under my own name, under Chris Brown. And then as time moved on, I moved into another artist name, and then eventually got to Four Candles. But actually, how I got there was kind of a combination of trying too hard for one in the first instance, and then finally managing to let go at the other end. So around about 2013, 2014, I was producing under the artist name Castano. I'd had a few tracks that were getting picked up by Nick Warren, and they were getting played out. And I found myself kind of rigid with what I was doing production wise. So I was producing the best that I could possibly produce, but I was also producing to order. So I was trying to make music that sounded like somebody else. I was trying to make music that would fit a genre, would fit a style. And it was just putting so much pressure on me that actually I was very difficult to come out with a resulting track that was going to, last the test of time, or it was going to be something that people pick up on and go, oh, that's a great tune. I want to play that again. And for me, I always thought of progressive house and the genre that we know and love as always trying to find that fresh new area and always trying to break new ground while staying true to the roots of like the emotive edge of what it is, and with those constantly moving grooves as well. But I found I wasn't able to do that. And I got together with a friend of mine, Dave Anderson, around about 2014, this was, and we've been producing together for a little while. And we started writing a couple of tracks just for fun. We were in the attic of my home in Swindon at the time. Got this like set up in there, bit speakers which were way too big for the room, by the way, blaring out these tracks. And we started writing these tunes, and we were like, oh, we should come up with a project name for this. And it was around the time when we were having that little bit of a, mid late 20s realization, if you like, early 30s realization that, you know what, you don't need to try super fucking hard to get the results you need. You need to relax and like just let things happen. And as soon as you let things happen in that sense, then, the good stuff just starts to roll out. So we were trying to come up with these names, and we were like, oh, we just need to come up with something that's just a little bit doesn't take itself so seriously. And Dave said, well, what about like just something that's got a comedic edge, something we enjoy? Four candles, like four candles, and I was like, that's the one, like right there. It was that like kind of moment where he was like, pick a name that's not going to be just doesn't take itself so serious, and it'll always be a reminder of where you are as an artist, and your output, where it kind of leans back into. So it kind of stuck with that mantra, if you like, Will. So I was like, right, okay, that's great. Push comes to shove, we spent a lot of time apart over the next few years. Dave was living down in Cheltenham. I was with work living up in Lincolnshire. So, other north, like kind of sort of northeast, East Midlands for me. And Dave was down south, both busy. He started his own business, and I was really busy in the aviation industry at the time. And I just got in touch with him around about 2017, 2018. And I was like, look, I'd not been writing for a couple of years, and I really wanted to move into the kind of professional realm of writing. I was like, right, I really want to do this as a professional. I know I've got what it takes. I've got enough of that belief and that willpower to get into the studio every day and burn through it. But I also really liked what we worked with in the past, that kind of idea, the concept. So I just contacted him, we've been mates for years, and I just said, look, man, I'm looking at taking this name forward. It feels right to me as opposed to just starting another name and keep going with it because it feels like something that's come from in here. So I was like, right, let's go. Do you mind if I go with the name Four Candles and just keep working as a solo artist? He was like, no, mate, it totally makes sense. Take it, run with it. And here we are now, a few years later, and still writing under that name. So, by the way, if you haven't seen the two Ronnie sketch Four Candles, I would definitely, urge you to have a look at it, because that's, it's a great comedy sketch. So that's a quick précis on why I am where I am with the name and why I'm still using it. Yeah.
It's thanks for sharing that story. I mean, I was always curious because progressive underground music is this super serious thing to people who really care about it. And I think sometimes even I forget really like what this scene is all about is having a great time on the dance floor. So I just feel like your name's kind of like a reminder of that, especially with the story that you shared with us, that it
Yeah.
doesn't always, even though you take your music more serious, like as serious as possible, every single aspect of this scene doesn't have to be so serious, life and death, like it feels like
Sure,
sometimes.
man. I think when I try and tap into that kind of um, playful energy, for sure, for me, is like the early stages of production. So when I'm looking at writing a new track and I'm looking for ideas, when kind of that need to be serious is starting to engulf me and going, right, oh, you've got to write a banger. It's got to be a big tune and make everyone's head melt. Like, no. At the same time, I'm going, right, man, just enjoy it. Enjoy the process for a bit. Let it happen. And it's a nice reminder there. Once I get through that, I'm not gonna lie. Once I get through to like post arrangement and into mix down, it's like serious head is on. There's still obviously a lot of creative juices to be working in the mix down. But that's when I'm like, right, now it's time to get the absolute best out of this track. But yeah, it just kind of helps me almost teeter on the edge of keeping the muse in the building. Doesn't always happen, but for the most part, if I'm able to dial into that, then the good stuff comes out.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think let's bring it into the present now because it's actually I have like a pretty relevant story. Just recently, for the first time, I spoke with Kabi,
Oh
Kabi
yeah,
AR,
yeah,
and
great guy.
what a nice young passionate guy. Um, I was I was like kind of familiar with his music, but how I really the track that really kind of opened my eyes and ears to him is the remix that he did of your track for the Futuro remix compilation.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was your track on the original Futuro that was probably my favorite track on the whole
Oh,
project.
mate, thank you. Yeah, no, there were some really good tunes on there as well.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
So can you kind of bring us just into I'm just curious how did it work for you? Because I'm sure being asked to be on this Bedrock compilation is achieving a goal of some sort. Like I think all producers in progressive underground view Bedrock as one of those benchmark labels.
yeah, yeah.
So I know John plays your tracks pretty routinely at this point out to dance floors, but can you kind of bring us through the process of what it was like to get notified that your track was selected for the Futuro compilation, the original compilation? And then can you kind of go into what it's like to be an artist and have your track remixed by another talented artist and if you're involved in that creative process because we hear a lot from the remixers about how they get all their stems but as the original artist like how do you set up a remixer for success basically so big question but if you can guide us
No,
through
no,
that whole thing
I'll
I'm really curious.
no, I'll unpack it bit by bit. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first part, Futuro, how the compilation, came about as far as my involvement. I was fortunate that I had my first major signing with Bedrock in 2022 with Devious. So I'd had that rapport build in time with John and with Scott at Bedrock. So, and I'd also done a remix for Aubrey Fry. And then over the year after that, I'd worked with Randall Jones as well on an EP. So I kind of built up the trust, if you like, with John, at the same time as sending him a lot of music from my own record label. So I was get that's how the kind of plays began. And I think once you build up that trust with, what these top flight DJs who are so busy and getting so much music, then they will tend to just spend that moment listening to your music that little bit more. But getting through the noise in the first place and getting your music heard is it's so difficult, of course. But yeah, so I was already luckily I was in that place where I'd had a couple of good releases under my belt with John and Scott. So I was approached actually by John. It was shortly before, if I remember rightly. So he contacted me to warm up for him up at Sub Club in 2023. And we had a bit of a chat over the phone before that. This was like in April 23. And of course, I played it cool. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll check my diary and I'll see if I can get up there and warm up for you. But I was like, oh, man, I can't wait. I've got to get up there and really do a good warm up for him. So that's a bit of an aside. But around about that time, he also said, look, I'd really like if you've got something for a potential compilation series that we're looking at for completely exclusive music that's not being released anywhere else and it's going to be licensed to us and released by us. And I was like, right, okay. I've got something for you, something I've just wrapped up, and it was Don't Talk About. And I sent it over to him. I've a little bit of a side story on that one actually. So originally the track was called Loose Lips, i.e., Don't Talk About, Keep Quiet, and I'd sent it over to him, Four Candles, Loose Lips demo. And he's like, yeah, I really like it. We'd like to take this one on, please. Scott will be in touch. I was like, cool, okay, no worries. And then as we got a bit further down the line, and I don't know how this even happened, there is in Manchester, as it goes, a post-punk kind of rock group. I think they might not be formed anymore, but they're called Four Candles, right? So, and it's not unsurprising. There's so many artists and so many bands and acts out there that you're probably going to clash up with the same name as someone else. Hence, Kabi, for example, Kabi brackets AR, because there must be another Kabi in the world somewhere.
Right.
So here we go. I've got this Loose Lips track name that I'm thinking this is a great track name. Nobody else can have it. And I type in Four Candles Loose Lips just to make sure. And a track by the band in Manchester is in there called Loose Lips. I'm like,
No
shit.
way.
Yeah. So I'm like, right. I'm like, that can't be right. So I press play on this thing and I'm like, yeah, that couldn't be any further from the kind of music that we've got going on right here. But I don't want to risk it. So I messaged John and I said, you're not going to believe this. Same story as I just told you. I was like, so I think we should probably change it to Don't Talk About. So we changed the track over to Don't Talk About anyway. And that was kind of it, really. I nudged him at one point. I wasn't happy with the kicks. I was like, oh, give me a bit of time. I want to go back and delve into the mix as we often do because I just wanted to get that little bit more out of it. I test ran it a couple of times. I played it at New Year's Eve, actually at Joshua Brooks when I'd warmed up for John. And it seemed to go down well, but it's one of those tracks when you're playing it for the first time, you're like, especially as the artist, you're just looking around going, oh, are they enjoying this or is it not? Because nobody signed it at that point. So it's like, I don't know if we're going to work out or not. And then as time went on, I realized, it's not a bad track at all. So it seems like it's been well received. Then obviously Futuro happened, and what a cracking release that was. It was just great to hear so many fresh takes on new tunes, and it just felt really. I can remember hearing it. So in fact, it was around about the time you did the interview with a few of the different artists that were on there, and I was out in the Philippines, and I can remember watching your interview with that one, and also listening through to the album on Spotify because I was out and about, and I was like, right, I'll get a proper listen when I get back, but let's have a listen through to what's going on. I thought, God, this is really good because it feels so fresh, and Definitely. I want to listen to it again. It had that kind of compilation feeling of, and I don't want to say of yesteryear because that would do a disservice to so many great mixes that have come out over the last few years, but it's one of those standout mixes where I was like, right, I'll reach for that again and again and again, and I'll listen to it again and again and again. And that was I found that exciting. I was like, obviously he's very good at what he does, John. He's good at finding those ear nuggets and those sounds that people are going to be like, oh man, I need to hear that again. And he did exactly that while still delivering the journey. And yeah, for me, that was a great album and a great way to really look forward and feel like we're still moving forward in progressive house as well. Moving on to the kind of Futuro remix side of things, there's a little bit of a side story on that one as well. So John messaged me and said, oh, we're looking at remixes for Futuro, and I'm thinking, wow, wicked. So me being the kind of cheeky person that I am, the first thing that I said back to him was, if you don't ask, you don't get. Can I have a John Digweed and Nick Muir remix? Why not? You've got to ask these questions, otherwise you're not gonna, you're never gonna know, are you? So I asked him, and it was like, so John does this sometimes. There wasn't a reply for days, maybe a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh God, I've upset him. So I'm like, he's probably thinking, no, Chris, no. But anyway, so I just thought, right, maybe that's not the option. Scott spoke to me about 2 weeks later, and he's like, have you thought of anyone for this remix yet? I was like, I've mentioned to John that I'd love that John Digweed and Nick Muir remix. That for me would be like, if that ever happens at any point in my musical career, that to me, I feel like that'd be so happy with that. But anyway, he's like, oh no, we're after basically fresh talent to bring on board and not necessarily the same artists that we've had before. We'd like to really mix in some new ones. So if you've got anyone in mind that is really in your mind starting to step up to the plate and really producing great music, then yeah, of course, like put them forward. Now, the first person that came to mind without even thinking was Kabi. After his 2023, he had a track called Spicy on Plassis Norris, Hickey and Kalo's label, and I was listening to that, and I can remember playing it, and I was using it as a stand-up track between tracks that I was writing at the time on the CDJs, just to see how well they were working between tracks. I was like, man, this producer, he was like 20, he's 25 now, I think.
Yeah.
He was 24 back then. I'm like, this guy has got so much talent, and just there was so much groove and energy in these tunes. I was like, man, there's something in this. And I contacted him. It just so happened that I contacted him actually when I'd gone out to the Philippines around that time and said, look, I'd really like to work with you at some point. I really like where you go with your music. You know, if maybe we could do something together, which, you know, I'm sure we might come on to a little bit later on. But his he was the first choice, mate. He was like, you know, who else to go for? I was like, yeah, Kabi. And you know, luckily Bedrock were happy with that. And Kabi, I mean, you've heard the remix. He delivered on that remix in spades, in my opinion. I was like, that is such a remix. Yeah, kind of. I saw a video of it being played in Rosario, and it just the place went off. I was like, wow, that's something. He's done a cracking job. But like I say, what a producer.
Oh, he's great. I that the remix of your track that he did kind of I'm working on this like Futuro remix video for John that will be out by the time this interview's out. And I'm trying to speak again to all the remixers like I did the first time, the producers. I start talking to this kid Kabi. I'm like, dude, this kid is not only insanely talented because I heard the track and it was, a standout track from the compilation, but you can just feel the passion. He's making this music out of his room at his parents' house. He like basically him and his friends are like self-teaching each other, just like a crew of they call themselves the Ableton Rats. Like they're just like teaching each other. And I was so like inspired. And he's talking about how much he has respect for the pioneering generation of the progressive sound and how progressive means to him. The only thing it means is never doing the same thing twice, always looking for new sounds, not being defined by genre. I it'll be announced by the time this interview's out. I named him the super progressive rising star of 2024 just because like
Yeah.
this young kid who, in my opinion, represents everything that is true and should be valuable in the progressive scene. And I was just I left the conversation so inspired. Very rarely I get to talk to people younger than myself in this scene. And I'm like, dude, let's freaking go. So I was super stoked on that remix. A question I have for you is, as the original producer of a track, how do you best set up a remixer for success? Because I've never actually heard how the process goes. Uh,
Sure,
I
yeah.
talked to the remixer. They're like, "Oh, we get the stems," but like, how does it work really?
Yeah, so I mean, in the most normal sense, it's quite a technical and boring thing to do, but it will usually be for me, it'll be export all the stems, single track stems, ready for the remixer, drop in some extra gems. So if there's a MIDI lead or an ARP that you've used somewhere and it's really like a key part of the track, I'll leave the MIDI in as well. I'll drop in a separate set of MIDI packs. I'll also drop in, I always say to people when they send remix packs to us at Keep Thinking, I'm like, if you give me the BPM and you give me the key, that's like bonus points. Makes me that little bit happier. Saves me having to do the work at the other end. But it's really that simple in that sense. The worst ones that I've had over the years are the ones where like somebody go, oh yeah, we'd like to get you on a remix, if I've been booked for a remix. And then the remix pack will come through and it's like a couple of loops and, you're left with very little. There have been times where that has worked to my favor. I've had remix requests come in over the last couple of years where the remix pack was by accident sent in part, and I'd had the work, the parts, and I said, look, I'm missing a few bits, but don't worry, I'm going to work with what I've got for now. and I'll see where we go. And sometimes that can drive your direction in a complete, go in a completely different direction from where you might have been kind of pulled in had you just dropped the stems in to start with and started working on them. Um, how people work in the remix themselves, I'm sure you've had from these other guys when they've for me, it's like pull the stems in, and I've usually got a set of contextual drums, something in machine. I've maybe got my analog rhythm on, and I'll start working a four candles groove against it, and that's really it's that simple to start with, and then I'll just let it kind of flow from there. But yeah, as far as giving people a head start on it, the other side of it is comms. So the communication side of it. So Kabi is a classic example. We were very to and fro with it right at the start, and I said, "Look, man, I've put you forward for a remix on Bedrock. I really want you to nail this for you because I really wanted to get him, on board. He deserved that kind of that opportunity because his music was just so good. And I must admit, I'd seen a few um, like parties that have been played in Argentina where John had played a couple of his bootlegs and a few other bits, and I was like, he's definitely on his radar. So this might be a wise kind of marriage, if you like, getting him on. But yeah, so making sure you have good contact with those people as well, because what you don't want to do is completely wipe out the remixer's kind of creative process and go, oh, right, I'd like you to do this. So I'd never say that. I'm just like, just be you, do you. Let whatever's coming come. And it's the same the other way around. So, I'll have good contact with original artists when I do remixes, but I don't think I've ever been told to remix in a certain style. Labels slightly different. Sometimes they might go, right, could we go down this route towards this kind of sound? And I get that, especially if you're trying to do like a well-rounded release. I did one not that long ago actually for Guy Barone and Casey Taylor, called Distance Between Us, and I did a remix for Afterglow Recordings. And on that one, my normal kind of progressive style, I moved away from that more drive-in style. I went a lot slower on request of Ela for Afterglow, and actually the results were pretty cool. It was nice to just deliver something slightly different from my kind of sound palette as well. So there's that kind of, you've got to give them the best opportunity by giving them the best stems, the best MIDI you can, but also I don't know, maybe sometimes you might think, right, I really want them to use this ARP, so I'll kind of earmark them towards the ARP secretly. So like, right, I've done this ARP extra bit in MIDI, and that'd be cool if you could use those sounds. But I haven't done that for years. It's just, here's the pack, be you, be the artist, and enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the coolest things about the remix video I did that in terms of speaking to all the different producers was their different approaches to how they like to remix. Some people take the stems and literally turn them into other, not only sounds but like instruments from the stems that are used in
Yeah,
different parts of the track. Other people don't like to change too much because they want to keep the original essence. But there was like a very wide spectrum. And my ultimate takeaway was that before doing this project, I thought that remixing might be slightly easier than original productions because you have pre-prepared materials and it's really down to how you put those materials and fit them together like a puzzle almost. Leaving this project, I'm like, remixing sounds like the most difficult thing on earth because like it sounds like a balancing act of trying to infuse your own artistry, honor some sort of essence of the original track, and I seeing how meticulous all these producers were. I saw a post unrelated from Dowden where he's like, I was working on this remix. I had 4 or 5 different versions before I even tried to like
yeah,
present it. So yeah, I just have a whole new respect for the remix process. But that specific remix of your track that I really loved. I think if we can move on now to more specific
sure.
about your background, because you're extremely passionate about this music. You're from the UK, where this progressive sound originated in. And what I'm curious about is what was kind of your first exposure to underground electronic music in general that got you hooked? Maybe not even on the progressive sound, because I know a lot of people come in through trance or through techno, but just
Yeah.
on underground electronic music culture, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that. People coming in from different angles of underground music, and that was certainly the case for me. I originally, as a youngster, I think I was about 10 years old. I was listening to a lot of my sister's CDs. She had all sorts, but a lot of it was a mixture that it was like, now that's what I call music, and it would be a real spread of stuff over the year, right? You know, that kind of annual compilation of everything that was popular, really. So there'd be a load of rubbish in there, but there'd also be like the odd dance music track, and I'd lock onto that. You know, it's like 9, 10 years old, and I was like, oh, I really like this. I mean, I'm talking like Faithless tracks, um, PF Project, that kind of stuff, and I was like, right, I was really into it. And I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know where it came from or how it was made or any of that stuff. I mean, why would I at that age, you know? So I was like, right, okay, I'll do a bit more digging. And as time went on, I realized, you know, as I was growing up, that I was drawn more into that electronic music sound. Fast forward around about 3 or 4 years to when I'm like, I mean, this is like 1999, and I'm 14 years old, Will, and I'm like, hearing about like trance, and I'm hearing it on the radio, and I'm hearing about all these mega parties in Ibiza and like all this stuff, and I'm like, God, I wish I was old enough to go get to these parties and go and enjoy it. But the next best thing for me was to just go and buy the music and go and like get hold of the music. And I can remember having Kiss Ibiza 99 CD, and that got played to death. Like literally, particularly CD2, which was like an orange CD, trance CD, and I was playing everything in there, Binary Finery, System F, all the Ferry Corsten stuff. And then as time developed above and beyond, Tiesto, and I started developing a taste then for trance music, and I was like, right, okay, bought Trance Nation 3, which was mixed by Ferry Corsten, and that was it. I was locked in. I was like, this music's so emotive. Like I loved the way it moved from one part to the next. I loved how the mixing worked. I was like, it's just because it was all new. I wasn't used to going to see a DJ or anything like that, so it was all fresh. So eventually, I was like, right, I need to start getting out and about, and I did. I started going out in Bristol, was one of the places I used to go out. And that was, in fact, to be honest, that was like one of the main places I would go out. And then in London, so I started going down to trance nights called Planet Angel. As I was coming of age, basically, where I was like, you know, just or maybe just a little bit underage. But I was going to these raves basically overnight, doing the thing where we get on the train and go to the rave, and then like stay out all night and then come back first thing the next morning, save a bit of money, not getting any hotels or anything like that, you know, none of that plush stuff. Go out,
Yeah.
rave, come home, and it was great. I just really enjoyed that kind of unity that we get from that. Then the movement into progressive for me kind of just, I think it just came. It's one of those things, you know, your taste kind of moves on. I was really into Tiesto, so In Search of Sunrise. I had all of his series from 1 to 7, 8 before it moved over to Richard Durand. And I can remember just getting towards the back end of those, and I was like, right, I think I'm ready to move into something a bit deeper. And I don't know how it really happened, but I can remember a friend of mine who I was house sharing with at the time, a guy called Al. He was big into the Global Underground series, right? And he was like, you need to get your ears on this, Chris. You'll be into it. So I started listening to a couple of them. I listened to, Tony DeVee's first one, and I started buying them. Then, secondhand. I was like, oh, I'm buying them. I'm gonna listen to them. But the key moment for me was only as recent, really. I say recent, it's 14 years ago now, but it was Structures, the first John Digweed Structures album. So I was in HMV when it was still hustle bustle of CDs and you could still get really good dance comps. And I was in there and I saw the front kind of cover of this yellow CD case, and I was like, man, this looks interesting. I'd heard a bit of his Global Underground mixes, and I was like, right, I'm going to give this a go for something a bit deeper. And I hadn't listened to Northern Exposure, I hadn't listened to the so-called, these iconic CDs. So to me, this was the iconic one. This was my moment to really connect with what John was doing. I hadn't been to Bedrock Nights because why would I? I wasn't really like hugely aware of them. I was still in like coming out of this kind of trance era, really. So I listened to this Structure CD in the car, and honestly, mate, it just did not leave the car for months. I was playing it and playing it and playing it, and I was just so excited and so eagerly lost in the sound over like that period of time. I could be on a 3 hour drive somewhere to go and see family and back, and it would feel like it was gone like that. And I was like, wow, what's happened? And it was doing it again and again and again. And I'm like, this is something. And that's what kind of got me into the sound. Then I was like, right, it's almost like my palette had changed, yes, a little bit, okay. But also I was starting to appreciate that kind of journeyman, like the creation of the whole big piece of music and a big DJ night, as opposed to going out and the unity and the enjoying the rave was one part, but going out there and getting sucked in and completely lost by the music, that was when it really started to happen to me. So kind of, although I was raving at an early age, I think the moment when the penny dropped for me into prog was around that 2009, 2010 era. I was like, yeah, this is me. This is where I'm at. And that was it. From then on in, I was like, that was my world. I started going to a lot more gigs that John was playing at. And one of the things I found out from a personal experience, was that for the most part, almost every time I went to go and see John play, or John and Sasha later on, or just Sasha on his own, I always felt like I was able to be so present in that moment and just enjoy that music for what it was and that journey from start to finish. And that I think is what kept me coming back so much. And then eventually I was like, right, I really want to write towards this sound. Hence, I started moving towards the kind of progressive house production as well. So yeah, that's a brief potted history.
Oh, it's
of,
it's awesome. I really appreciate it. At some point along that journey, you turned your passion for the music and passion on the dance floor, and you said to yourself, I want to make an even bigger and more personal contribution to this scene, and I want to start DJing and writing music myself. When did that happen for you? Do you come from a musical background? Were you fully inspired this music to start from scratch and say, "Hey, I want to make music just like this music that's taking me on a journey"? How did producing and DJing enter the fold for you?
Yeah, so I mean, which this won't be uncommon, I imagine, but DJing kind of came as a natural progression in the early noughties. So around about 2002, 2003, um, a lot of my friends, between us, we were using decks. I had a pair of Stanton Straight 60s, which were rubbish by today's standards. When you moved the pitch on it, it would get locked in the middle, and you'd lose that kind of sense of time, and you were constantly moving the vinyl. But anyway, I mean, that was where I started out, and I had a mixture of records, everything from trance that I was buying to like people had bought R&B and stuffed it in the, into the record box, and we'd had drum and bass, some of the UK stuff, UK garage at the time, and there was a real mix, a real hodgepodge of like tunes. But that's where I really cut my teeth DJing. But that was for pleasure, really, more than anything. Will so I was enjoying it, and then I'd occasionally play nights out as well, like local clubs. When it was a bit more of a common thing to do, I'd suggest where you like be like, oh, do you want to come and play here and warm up for this person, and I'd be like, right, yeah, cool, yeah, get him on. Oh, he knows how to DJ. He's got some decks at home, kind of thing, and that's how it used to work for us. Particularly when I was living down in Oxfordshire for a while, so I used to go out and play at a few different venues there. But actually, the production side of it was more of scratching the itch. So I got to about 2007 when I was really learning how to produce trance. I was listening to a lot of Anjuna beats at the time, and that's how I really got into writing music. And it was like, right, how do I start? As you say, was it from scratch or was it from a background? And that was from scratch. Edirol MIDI keyboard, sat there with a computer that was way too underpowered for the work, that was struggling constantly in Fruity Loops. And that's where I first cut my teeth, started to produce in Fruity Loops for a couple of years. And then started to take it a little bit more serious when I was trying to find out how to make it sound more professional. And it kind of goes on from there. Every little bit's just kind of chipping away at trying to make the music more impactful and make it actually mean something as opposed to just some garbage as it was in the first few times. But we've all got to start somewhere, right? And that's the key. And over time, it just kind of slowly developed.
When you were getting into um, the underground and being a participant in it. Can you kind of explain to me the scene in the UK at the time? Because I'm really knowledgeable about everything from, let's say, the Hacienda through to Ministry of Sound, Renaissance, and Cream. But these kind of early 2000s years, I don't know too much about. So I'm just curious about what were some of the major clubs that you were going to, who held the residencies, because I'm sure residencies were still very popular at that time. And just what was the landscape of the scene like around the time that you were really starting to get into it?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I think mid noughties was really when I was going out quite a lot. So the kind of super club mentality had well and truly come about by then. So we were, you're talking about like Gatecrasher nights, God's Kitchen, for example. That was the one that we go to quite a lot in Digbeth. So we used to go to those nights specifically to go and see artists such as Above and Beyond, or I really used to enjoy going to see Eddie Halliwell as well, who I haven't seen on the circuit for quite a long time now. Maybe I've just kind of missed that. Maybe he's played somewhere, and we're just in different worlds now. So there was that element of it from this super club build up where you were starting to think, oh, I want to go and see a specific artist. But at the same time, there was still that kind of underground rave culture going on in London in particular. And I know I briefly mentioned about Planet Angel earlier on, like Planet Angel trance nights that were under the arches in London. They were just something else. They were, you get there for the night, you get there about midnight. It was trance in one room, kind of funky house as it was at the time, coming through in another room, and then there was a chill out room in another room as well. Loads of bright lights and like cool colors everywhere. Really, kind of just the general idea was, being positive and having a positive vibe, meeting people, loads of friendly faces. And what they used to do at like 3 in the morning, they'd stop the music completely, which you think, why would they do that? But they'd stop the music at bang on 3 in the morning, and this was an experience. They'd bring round fresh fruit to all the people on the dance floor, and then like it'd be like a 5 minutes almost, and then someone would play a didgeridoo up at like at the front of the dance floor, and then 5 minutes later, right back at it, send it. We're back into the bangers, go for it. And that was my first real experience of residency, seeing residents play. There was a guy called Geraint, Sly One, and they were like your grassroots trance producers in London. So you go and see those, and they were releasing on decent records on homegrown record labels. So that was still going on then. And I think I kind of caught the back end of that before things just started to shift in towards the kind of Beatport era. So that was interesting. So a bit of both, really. I could go to Syndicate in Bristol for a trance night. I could go to Ibiza for what was Cream on Thursdays, and have that experience at Amnesia. And then Birmingham for God's Kitchen was another regular haunt for us. So it was kind of a mixture of two. So I'm kind of sometimes I look back and I go, oh, I missed the 1999 thing, and I'm like, oh, I was too young. But actually, I look back at it now, and I've got a little bit of rose-tinted specs, but at the same time, I think I was quite lucky to go to a bit of a mixture of both that kind of big club vibe and also the underground party still.
Oh, it's awesome to hear about. And I just got a whole bunch of new clubs to go and research and look up for YouTube videos. That's really cool. That like um familial environment that you explained on the dance floor with the fruit coming out, the didgeridoo.
Yeah.
It's so old school to me, and its ethos like that this is not only like a party where you're intended to, it's not about getting as messed up as possible to have the music hit you as hard as possible. It really sounds like we're all in this together, like let's look out for each other kind of vibe. Let's the club giving out fruit. It's something you don't necessarily see anymore, or if you do, it's happening at the true underground events. I love hearing that. Can we move it more into now kind of your production process methodologies and
Yeah,
techniques?
yeah, sure.
Because you're a prolific producer. You have a very unique, uncompromising, but also your sound has no boundaries, in my opinion. There's no limits. Like there's no limits in the directions that you take it. What, in terms of consistency, that's kind of what I think of when I think of you as a producer each year, quality tracks. Um, what's your production process like to stay feeling creative and motivated and sustaining that over a few years?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because it ebbs and flows, right, Will? So you'll know this. From whatever walk of life you're into, whatever your thing is, whatever you're into doing, there are some mornings where you wake up and you just don't have that energy. You don't have that ability to be able to write in a particular way, or whether whatever it is, whatever the creative pursuit is. And I have battled with it in the past. I've got a much better with it now. For me, keeping the roads kind of unblocked and to be able to write consistently, it comes down to that very, we were talking about right at the start about the kind of four candles mantra. It comes back to that kind of keeping my brain playful, keeping that thought process of the music playful, and not forcing it so hard that like, oh, I need to write a tune for Bedrock. Oh, I want to release on X label, And I think the moment that happens is the moment the muse walks out of the building. You go, right, okay, right. I'm going to write these two bangers. They're going to get released next year and everyone's going to love them. And the muse is gone. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't work like that. So I've found a process where I'm like, right, how do I get going? The technical and boring side of it is templates, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Where I work with in machine particularly and in analog rhythm to build up my drum grooves, and with a couple of synths, and that's it, just to get going. And I keep that simplicity there. but at the same time, I keep that kind of element of right, there's creative limitation in what I'm using, but there's no creative limitation in what the output is. So you go, right, okay, I'm going to use the virus, which is back there. And by the way, I hadn't had a virus for quite a while. I spent nearly a year without one. Worst mistake of my personal career. We'll come on to that in a minute. But I mean, yeah, I'm so glad to have it back now. And I have usually have the virus on. I've usually got a couple of Arturia synths there kicking around, a bass and a Core Gen 1 bass, which I've used pretty much all the time, because it just sounds good. It's like a brass preset that's been noodled around with a little bit, just to get that warmth in the low end. And then, like I say, machine and analog rhythm. But because they are there and these are your machines to work with and to get talking with each other, they become like bread and butter. I'm like, right, okay, let's have a dial in with this one. Let's have a play with Virus for a while and see if I can get the sound I want in my head. And I think over time, the more I've learned, as my productions have gone on over the years, and the more I've spent time in the studio, I've found it easier to dial in the sound that I want. I found it easier to get closer to where I want to be to start with. And then I can go, right, all right, it's that classic phrase that you hear banded around every now and again, learn the rules so you can then break them. So I'm like, right, okay, I've got the sound. How do we mess it up a bit? How do we like go off on a tangent a little bit and just mess with people's heads? Well, just that little bit where you go, right, what the bloody hell just happened there? And actually, I'll lean into Nick Muir on this one. So it was about 4 years ago, start of lockdown, right? So about 4 years ago, Nick posted something up on the internet. I think it was on Facebook, Instagram, can't remember. And it said, producers, send me your tracks. And it was like, do you want to spend a little bit of time working with Nick, with a bit of one-to-one production for him to help finish them off? So I think from what I gather, quite a few people sent music into him, and then the ones that he thought could get over the line that would be good tunes to finish off, he got in touch with those producers, and then he works with them. And I think he's still doing that to this day. I'd speak to people every now and again, and like, oh yeah, I did a session with Nick not that long ago, and I still speak with Nick regularly now. But now we're in like Nerdsville. Last weekend we were talking about mixed stuff, so we're on a completely different field now. But back then it was like Nick got in touch with me. I'd sent him this track. What was it called? I think it was called Heal. It was one of the tracks that I ended up putting on Bandcamp as a Bandcamp download. And he sent it back. He was like, "Yeah, I really like this. Have you got anything else you want to send over that maybe we could work on?" And I was like, "Oh my God, Nick Muir is like, just drop me a message." I was so excited. I was like, "Oh my!" So I spent then the next few days in the studio prepping up stuff for him, and then the long story short is we ended up working on a couple of tracks around about 2020 and 2021. One of which was Chemistry, which is a track that came out on um, Forensic Records, right?
Oh, nice.
And so we were I was into this production sphere with Nick. We did 3 sessions, I think, in the end. And one of the things he taught me, to go back onto the point of what we were talking about before with creative process, was don't be vanilla really with what you're working with. If you've got something to say it. Like if you want to expand on what you're saying, don't be afraid of reaching out that little bit further and just wringing the neck out of it. Don't be afraid of trying something new. Don't be like, because he was listening to my productions like, these are really nice, but they're a bit vanilla. They're not quite, they're passable. Somebody will play them out, yeah, sure, but are they going to be remembered? That's the thing, and it stuck with me so much. It's like, right, thanks, Nick, because that's really been something that's kept me exploring other avenues and kept me, and I can remember having this chat with him, and I was like, I really appreciate it, Nick, because you've given me that kind of belief in my head that if I'm able to do the mainstay production elements, then I'm now free to start exploring out in other areas. And
Yeah.
sometimes you've just got to reach out and do that, even when you don't think you're ready. Like you've got to reach out and try the new shit. So people are going, "What is this?" You're going to divide opinion at times. I've had people go, "I'm really not into your new track," and I'm like, "Okay," and other people going, "That is a banger," and you're like, "Right, okay, thank you," because it's just trying these new areas, right, and trying to push that sound, particularly that the mantra of progressive house of trying to lean forward whilst staying true to the roots of the sound. It's so important, and to me, that's what allows me to like basically pour out my soul into the music and go that little bit further, having that creative freedom. But yeah, Nick was fantastic with that. Very, very good guy. And I know you've interviewed him. I think I tuned in. I was in Ibiza a couple of years back to one of your early interviews with Nick. And yeah, it was great that you had him on, man. He's just such a nice guy, isn't he?
Oh, he's probably one of my favorite people, not only I've met in this scene, but have ever met in my life. He's been so incredibly kind, but he's also really just, as you probably know, one of the funniest people I've ever met. And he has a story for everything. But
We were
yeah,
joking last
he's
week.
the man. And like when I think of Nick, I actually don't even it's crazy because obviously you think of the productions, but I
Yeah.
think of Nick, he one day he brought me to ring bells at the
Yes.
church
Yes.
near where he lives. And the sight of who I think is like one makes literally the best kick drum I've ever heard. Like Nick Muir, and he's ringing these
The Nick kid.
bells like serious sound. It just all made sense. Now he I was gonna ask you like what are some moments of confidence that you got as a producer? And I think that's like one of the most important things to have
Yeah.
someone that you look up to, unequivocally a legend in the scene saying, "Hey, you know what you're doing. Just go for it, bro.
Go and do it. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
necessarily like don't hold yourself back out of disconfidence because you have it. Just go for it."
Yeah, and we actually had it. So the first EP that went to Bedrock, the Devious EP, that track, at the time, I think I produced. When did I produce that? It was middle. It was that April, May 2021, right? I'd worked on it, and it was around it was shortly after the last sessions we'd had together. And I was still thinking, oh, maybe I need to pop back in with Nick and, just maybe I can, learn a little bit more from him, because he's got so much information and so much advice to impart. It'd be kind of make sense to. And I sent him over Devious. It was whilst we were wrapping it. In fact, yeah, the first time I sent it, we were wrapping up chemistry, right? And he hadn't got the stems. Talking about stems, he wanted to work with the stems over his side in Logic and show me a few tricks, right? So we get to the start of this session, and he's like, "Oh, you're really sorry, Chris. Stems aren't here for some reason." I was like, "Oh, no worries. I'll just ping them over." We transfer. Off they went. So while we were waiting, I went, "Oh, well, were you there, Nick?" I was like, I've got a new track here that I've been working on. It's a bit like out there. It's a bit like full on. But I'd love to get your opinion on it whilst we're waiting for these stems because the stems are going to take 15 minutes to get across and put in. So I'd already like teed up the SoundCloud link. So I was like, right, here's the SoundCloud thing. Have a listen. And he's got his headphones on in this session. So I mean, apart from a shared DAW experience where I can hear everything and we're making decisions together, I can't hear what's going on in his other parts of his computer. So he's got SoundCloud on, I assume. I can see his face. He's got his headphones on, and it's silent my side. So in my head, I'm thinking, right, this is the first part. This is the breakdown. This is as it starts to build up, and the kick starts to roll out, and this frequency modulation change happens in Devious. It just starts going right, and I was like, I don't know what his reaction is, and he's going like this, sat with his headphones on. He's like, there's more silence, and I'm like thinking, God, does he hate it, or is it what's he thinking? And he come off the headphones, and he was like, well, that's something, isn't it? Well, that's something, isn't it? I was like, well, man. And so I said to him a couple of weeks after we'd finished the chemistry session, I was like, do you think it's worth coming in and working on Devious? I'd like to, maybe it's worth just if there's anything else we could get out of it. And he was like, I'm not working with you on that one. Some tracks are best left where they are. And I was like, and that to me was the moment, like it was that kind of full circle moment. I was like, right, I've written a track that's going to work on the dance floor. Nick is telling me to leave it well alone, get it out there. And he's like, right. And that's when he passed it on to John at that time. He's like, I'm passing it on to John. I think he'll enjoy it, but we'll wait and see. It's, John's taste varies, as we all know. So we were like, right, okay. I sat there and waited and waited and waited. And then I got an email from Nick a couple of weeks later. And he's like, have you seen John's Facebook post or Instagram post? He's like, he says, if that's not good news, I don't know what is. And I was like, what's he on about? So I popped into Instagram and he's recorded this set in Egypt with Devious playing and it just going off. And I was like, oh man, like that was number one. I mean, that's a goal for anybody, isn't it? Just to have your music played on the dance floor and enjoyed by people. That's the number one like thing. And then I caught up with John. Actually, I went to go and see him play at Fabric when he did live in London. Completely not aware whether he was going to play Devious or not that night. And I luckily caught him just as he was walking into Fabric, and he played it in San Francisco as well. And there was another video there. And I was thinking, oh, I might be onto something here. He might be interested in it. And then I bumped into him. I just said, look, thank you very much for the support. I'm Chris, Four Candles, that track Devious that Nick sent over to his my tune. And he's like, wow, that's some track, isn't it? He's like, yeah, he said, I might be interested in signing it to Bedrock. So similarly to where we fast forward to me going, oh, all right, I'll see what I'm up to. I might be able to come and warm up. I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, cool. And I'm thinking, yes, yes. Inside, I was like,
Yeah.
because it was like such a big moment for me being like at that point, having been in the Bedrock sound for like 12 years solid, So I was like, yeah, that's it was a real moment. And then it got played that night in Fabric at like 4 in the morning. And yeah, just some experience that is when your music just gets enjoyed without the kind of ego attached because nobody knows it's yours. People aren't looking at you and going, this is your tune. It's
Yeah,
more of
yeah.
a like, it's you're there on the dance floor and everyone there is just locked into the music. It's the most beautiful thing, in my opinion.
Oh man, I
Um,
mean, a decade before you're sitting there listening to Structures, getting into this music, like going down the
yeah,
rabbit hole for the first time. Now it, played out on the same label by the same DJ. That's
yeah,
freaking
yeah.
awesome, man. Wanted to ask you something as kind of a potential resource for aspiring producers that listen to this podcast. And this is something I'm trying to focus on more, which is help inspire the next generation of progressive producers to keep on with their production journey because it's no secret that the production landscape, especially in the progressive underground scene, is financially dire. Like it's really hard to make a go at it and have it be something reliable financial wise outside of just doing it for pure passion. But the people that do it
Yeah,
for pure
sure.
passion will always have something there. But to keep inspiring not beginner producers but like aspiring underground progressive producers to keep clocking in to their DAW every day, what are
Oh,
some either exercises that you find that get the creativity going, or what are some plugins or pieces of equipment that you found maybe when you were at this stage of just needing to keep logging hours and keep improving really helped you along your journey?
yeah. So, I mean, the first one, I actually did this. So, in around about 2019, my wife at the time, Jill, said, she's still my wife now, by the way,
Yeah.
but at the time she said, one of us is going to have to leave the industry we're in if you're going to pursue music, and I think you need to go and like basically kicking me out the door. It's like I've got your back, go and do the music thing, and I was like, right, I'll do that, but I need to prove to myself that I'm 100% in this and that I'm going to be committed every day. So I was like, right, before I get overexcited about going pro or anything like that, I need to make sure I am a committed, passionate hobbyist again, back in the fold and writing every day. So the point you made about trying to keep producers in that kind of zone is something I talk about all the time over at Patreon, which is something I run separately as well. And actually, the biggest thing for me was getting up and doing just that 30 minutes to an hour every morning. And that sounds like a lot, right, at the start, but it's that kind of gym routine mentality that I try and impart on people. The moment you start going to the gym, the first few times, it's like you're like, Christ, my muscles are sore. I don't want to go and do that run again because my heart's bouncing through my neck. And you don't want to do it. So you're like, right, you kind of resist it a bit. And then over time, it gets easier. And we all know this. If you keep at it, then it becomes something you can settle into a routine. It's no different with applying yourself to the DAW. And I find for me, what worked was I was at the time working full time as, in the aviation industry as an engineer. So I was working a fairly taxing day job, particularly in risk management and all that other boring stuff at the time. So it was really like going to loads of meetings. By the time I got home, the creative juices, if there were any, were not interested in coming out at all. So I'm like, right, okay, what I need to do is get working early in the morning. So I'd get up first thing in the morning. At the time, it was about 5 in the morning. I'd do an hour of production. At the time, it was in Logic, and then over to Ableton, and I would just make everything as easy as possible to access. Writing an idea with Machine next to me, which is, what I would say for me, one of my key tools for getting the grooves down quickly and just going with it, whatever I could get done in that hour to learn a little bit in that hour time. And then at the end of that hour, right, breakfast, shower, off to work, off I go. And just having that routine, it sounds a bit regimented. And, to some people that might sound like that. But if you're committed to getting that kind of consistently better, having that routine all of a sudden doesn't become a chore anymore. And you start waking up at 5 in the morning. You're like, oh, I'm going to get after it. I'm writing tunes. Like, it's no longer, oh, I really want to make it and be like a better producer. It's like, no, I am doing this thing. And once you're in that mentality and you've got that kind of that you're zoned in on it, nothing's stopping you. And like I know different people find it harder to connect with that, and it can take some people longer than others. But I am a believer in that, the 66 days form a habit mentality. If you're able to keep going with it and push and push and push and push, eventually it's just so second nature. I mean, I know you and I before we started recording today talked about time off, right? And I was saying it's going to be difficult for me to not just wander into the studio, but that's because the routine is just so ingrained in my head now over the years. So that was the one thing I'd say to producers. Even it doesn't have to be the hour regimented 5 a.m. thing. Find a slot that works for you. Find like a period in the day where you can just dial into the studio for 20 minutes. 20 minutes, man. Turn on your computer, sat there with whatever it is you like to noodle around with. It could be Ableton within the drum rack, could be doing design a synth. But the most important thing is make sure at the end of it you're aware of where you've got to and where you want to go next, because then you can go, right, okay, I really worked on that synth today. Tomorrow I'm going to start working the drums and build up a bit of an arrangement. Just I mean, my other thing I would say is don't worry so much about writing the perfect track first time out. It just doesn't happen like that. Like, write some tunes, make some mistakes. God, if you search Chris Brown, right? Chris with a K, search Chris Brown and look at my early work. Listen to it. It's out there for the world to listen to. You're going to hear all sorts of production error. You're going to hear all sorts of mixing error. I mean, I didn't even know what mixing was back then. I wasn't, I was nowhere near where I am now, but that's all part of the journey, right? So, getting in there, write the tunes, release them if you want to release them. Don't release them if you want to hold on and wait till you get to a standard where you're happy to release under that artist name. It's completely up to you. People do it in different ways as well. But the most important thing for me is routine.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I'm feeling inspired to open up my Ableton on my computer and get like cracking on this. I definitely will leave the link for anyone listening that wants to see what kind of your lessons have to offer. I'm going to leave your Patreon in
Oh yeah,
the
thanks, man.
description because I think I don't know, I can just tell from your approach to teaching that I think a lot of aspiring producers could benefit from what you have to say. Just be like simply to how I'm reacting to what you're saying now. It seems like a
No,
very
thanks.
positive teaching style. So I'll put that link in the description. We're coming up on an hour now, which time flies. My last question for you is what can you share with us that we can maybe be expecting from you? Maybe even if it can't be specifics, what can your
No,
fans expect from you in 2025?
well, I'll leave this nugget. Kabi and I have worked on something recently, so we've been working together because that was kind of a natural. I think I alluded to it right at the start. It was going to happen at some point. So yeah, keep your powder dry on that one. I think that will be that'll come out in due course. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. From a label perspective, Keep Thinking, which is a record label I've been running for 10 years now. Well, it will be 10 years. It gets to its 10th birthday next March. So from March through to kind of the end of the year, we're going to be doing a couple of VAs with some of the original artists and some fresh artists as well. I mean, back in in our first couple of years, we had artists like Jamie Stevens and Express 2, and we had all sorts of artists on there. But over time, it's developed and moved in so many different directions. So it's going to be exciting to compile that together. I'm also going to do a little look back and a mix of that, my favorite tracks over the last 10 years as well,
Oh,
which I think
amazing,
would just
man.
be a nice little touch there. Sometimes you pull out some tunes from the past and you're like, wow, this is so like fresh still. And I love doing that even now. I've got a release coming out with Steve Parry as well.
Oh, great.
Start of 2025, a track that was played not that long ago on Transitions, actually, called Misco, and then another one on the B side as well, which is, yeah, we're looking forward to getting those out on Celador. I think probably around about February, March time, but
Oh,
that's
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 great.
not set in stone yet. And also, I'm actually writing my first studio album, Will. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
exciting.
I'm about, if I'm going to be really honest, I'm about halfway through. I've got a lot of the tracks lined up, but it's now about like really, I really want it to work as one coherent piece
Oh,
across
of course.
the
Yeah.
dish and not just be, that kind of, oh, just a few tracks that he's bundled together like an EP. And there's quite a few, I've been allowed to go off in some slightly different directions because it's complete freedom, isn't it? So yeah, I don't know what label that'll go to. I haven't thought about that in the slightest. I try and it's another thing that I try and impart on people as well is when you're writing, don't write for a label, just write
Of
for you.
course.
And the stuff, whatever comes out, comes out. And I'm very much there with that. And I'm enjoying that process. I did a little bit in earlier this year. and then it kind of got lost when other remixes came forward and work came forward, and then I was finishing off a couple of EPs, and I was like, "No, Chris, you got to get dialed back into this." And yeah, the last few weeks has been I've been really enjoying it, so I'm looking forward to getting that one out there. Um, Also, I'm not going to be in the country from March next year, so I'm going to be out in Argentina from March till June. So I'm looking forward to getting out there, catching up with Kabi, of course, and a few other people, and hopefully a few gigs lined up as well. So that will be good
Oh,
to
that's
get out
really great. Is
there,
that
and
like a
experience.
creative retreat slash tour of sorts?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say kind of a self-induced retreat from the studio to
Yeah.
go
Oh, that's great, man.
to go get locked into music across the other side of the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, really, really looking forward to that though. Yeah,
Yeah, dude, so much to look forward to.
yeah. It's I've never been to Argentina by the way either, so it'll be my first time out there.
Oh, that's
So
gonna be awesome, man. I can't thank you enough for taking so much time for this interview today. I learned so much. I'm leaving consistently searching for inspirations to continue to stay excited about this music, about this scene, about progressing whatever we're working on. And I definitely found that in this interview today. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to have you on today, and I hope to see you soon at some point.
no, thank you, Will, and thank you for everything you're doing with the scene as well, exposing it in so many different directions from the past to the present as well. I think it's just really important because it gives people that opportunity to just see the breadth of where we've all come from, and where every like when there's newcomers coming into the scene as well, so they get that experience as well. It's fresh. Yeah, you did a great job, man, and mate, I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, no, thank you so much for that, and I'll see you soon, man. Be well.
Cheers, Will.